All right, good morning to everybody.
Thank you.
So those that are back that haven't been here for a while, we're actually in sort of part two of something, but don't worry, you're going to be just as ready as anybody else here for part two. So just like a 30-second intro, really from the beginning of Pesach, we've been making our way through sort of key teachings and texts from Pirkei Avot, Ethics of the Sages, because it's traditionally studied in the intervening weeks of the Omer between Pesach and Shavuot. And we sort of didn't finish some of the key ones that I wanted to look at. And we, in particular, were looking just at one teaching. And we did part one last week. We're going to do part two today, which is chapter 6 of Pirkei Avot, Mishnah 6. So just a really quick overview again. Pirkei Avot is considered the ethical statements of the rabbis of the Mishnah and the Talmud, really of the Mishnaic time. It is considered a book within the Mishnah. It's also called Mishnah Avot, and it's translated sometimes as Ethics of the Father, Teachings of the Sages, and sort of everything in between. It really just means chapters of the Avot, and I'm not going to translate that.
By the way, before you go on,
yes,
I had read some commentary over the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, please.
I am online with a extremely orthodox rabbi who says that you should study Pirkei Avot between now and the 7 weeks preceding Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. Your commentary on that?
Sure. Yes, 100%. Yes. Number one, you should always study it. But yeah, we're in actually another 6-week window. Right, the 6-week window now is we have 3 weeks until the 3 weeks. Which then after the 3 weeks are the saddest 3 weeks on the Jewish calendar, beginning with Shiva Asar B'Tammuz, the 17th of Tammuz, ending with Tisha B'Av, which remembers and commemorates the destruction of the temples in Jerusalem. And then it's 7 weeks to Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. So we actually are in another 6-week window here. And again, anytime the rabbis see a 6-week window, there are 6 chapters of Pirkei Avot, and it's like prime time to study Pirkei Avot. Several people just study Pirkei Avot all the time. And in fact, one of my first internships I had in rabbinical school, not one of the first, but I had an internship during rabbinical school where I spent a month at Beit Tshuva, the House of Recovery. We've talked about it before. Rabbi Mark Borovitz, who grew up in our congregation and just actually retired as the founding director and rabbi at that Jewish halfway house in LA. When I interned there, actually every day we studied Pirkei Avot, these ethical teachings, with the residents of the house who were battling addiction and recovery. And actually we literally spent an hour making our way through this and just sort of would cycle through all the time, because this is these are powerful texts, guiding texts that teach us how to live our lives every single day. And I will share with you, there's some very interesting commentary and interpretations of how those recovering addicts applied the teachings to their own lives and their own sort of work in recovery work and reestablishing their lives and rededicating their purpose and overcoming their addictions. So yeah, there's many different ways to understand this. And in fact, I've showed you a couple of the commentaries that are used. Here's the other one, which is it's called Visions of the Fathers, if you can see my screen. This is from Rabbi Abraham Twersky of blessed memory, Dr. Rabbi Abraham Twersky of blessed memory, who dedicated his life to mental health and addiction recovery as well. He was a very well-known Orthodox rabbi from the very well-known Twersky family.
Yeah, my father's family came from Milwaukee.
Yeah, so he wrote an entire commentary of Pirkei Avot, which is really based on mental health slash addiction as a focus. So every once in a while I'll bring you some commentary from this. I always do, but it's sort of I have a few go-tos for Pirkei Avot, and this is among the go-tos. Okay, I think enough of the introduction. So now we're zooming in. We're in the last chapter of Pirkei Avot. Actually, some people consider this an add-on chapter, perhaps not the original. Perhaps originally there were only 5 chapters of Mishnah Avot, and this is an additional 6th one because the structure is different. The sort of the way that they are. These are longer teachings that are Pirkei Avot are usually like really short and succinct, really like pithy, sort of like moral statements to follow. And chapter 6 are these sort of expansive teachings that cover a lot of bases, but they thematically they fit with Pirkei Avot because they are all about how to make ourselves the best people we can be. Okay, so we started Pirkei Avot. I know I'm getting a long intro, so sorry for all the long intro. For those who weren't here last time, chapter 6, Mishnah 6, teaches the 48 qualities in which a person can acquire Torah. Right? If you remember, and they compare, what did they compare? What are the three things that people can acquire in life according to Judaism? There were 3 sort of statuses or crowns, or there's different ways of interpreting. Do you remember what the other? So this one was you can acquire Torah, or a life of Torah, or a life dedicated to Torah through these 48 means, or 48 ways to live your life, or 48 qualities. Remember what the other 2 were, those who were on last time?
Good name.
A good name. So actually, you're actually quoting the other. There's a second teaching in Pirkei Avot. The second teaching in Pirkei Avot is, I guess I'll give it to you. So the rabbis say there are 3 crowns that a person can acquire: a crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty. Right? So how do you become a Kohen, a priest? Right? How do you become a king? Right? The leader of the Jewish people. Or how do you become someone dedicated to Torah? Perhaps this is how you become a rabbi. I don't know. Right? And then Ruth, you gave me the punchline. In that one, that's I think in chapter 4 of Pirkei Avot. I don't remember exactly. It says, yeah, but there's a better crown, right? Don't talk to me about the crown of Torah, the crown of priesthood, and the crown of royalty, right? There is a crown that is better than all of them combined, which is Keter Shem Tov, the crown of a good name, right? Being a person who has a good reputation. So our Mishnah that we're looking at, chapter 6, Mishnah 6, now, I think delves deeper into that, right? Like the rabbis just posited this idea that there are 3 crowns that a Jew can attain in life: becoming a priest, becoming a king, and becoming a doctor. No, I'm sorry, becoming a rabbi, becoming someone dedicated to a life of Torah. I know my parents are there. Hi, Mom and Dad. I almost got my medical degree yesterday because now my dogs are going to. Because I was honored to speak at the men's club installation of Joel Herman as our new men's club president. Some of you were there. I know Eric was there. I'm not sure who else was there, right? And Dr. Dale Levy talked from a doctor about, it was all about like the heart, right? What does Judaism say about the heart? He presented as a cardiovascular surgeon, and I presented as a rabbi. I said we should switch. We should switch. Okay. And he got pretty, we almost like got a credit of medical school from what he was teaching. Seriously. Okay. Am I right? Like he taught us how to do a bypass operation.
He did.
And like he literally did. Like I thought if I slept at a Holiday Inn last night,
yeah,
and based on his teaching, I probably could go into the OR today.
You're qualified.
I know. Okay, sorry, but enough of that. Okay, so Pirkei Avot, chapter 6, Mishnah 6, enough of this introduction, right? Boils down, it says that there are X many qualities. I have it in front of me. I shouldn't like do it off the top of my head. There are 30 qualities in which kingship can be acquired. There are 24 qualities in which priesthood can be acquired, but there are 48 qualities in which Torah can be acquired. Don't you think it should be the opposite? Like to actually be the king, the leader of the Jewish people, there might be a few more like things to tick off, than just a life dedicated to Torah or a rabbi? What do you think? We didn't talk about this last time, but do you find that fascinating that the thing that requires the most training is a life dedicated to Torah than to becoming the king or the Kohen Gadol, the high priest?
I want to go back to the priesthood. Not
Yes.
everybody can be a priest. You have to be a son or a family of a priest. Not everybody can, but Torah, everybody can.
Right. We talked about that. I think Jackie said it right. This is right. And so, by the way, same thing with the king, because it always was, some dynasty line from a family, right? And in fact, right, theoretically, it's supposed to, after King Saul, we sort of nixed him, right? It's always, the king is always supposed to be from the Davidic line, right? So again, right, there has to be some yichus here. I got to do, now even like we have to do the Kohen DNA. You can do, you can do that. You can do that. I know a lot of people who have like done the test. They have proudly shown me their Kohen status. Yes, that the DNA has shown it. Yes, so you are 100% right, Ruth, number one, right? So that's more just like after you qualify, already qualifying as a very small segment of the Jewish people, right? What else? Okay, but Torah, as you said, anyone can achieve this. So maybe that's why there's these sort of, it's a little harder, it's a little, right? This is the training grounds. This is like, has anyone here done basic training? Yes, Ruth has. Yes, Ruth has. Yeah, she knows. Yeah. Again, we'll actually study Torah in a second. Sorry I'm giving Rick really long introductions, but I trained as a Navy chaplain for a summer, and we had what I call modified basic training. It was 150 rabbis, priests, ministers, and one imam. There are only two rabbis, but two rabbis, one imam, and the rest of the 150 were priests and ministers. And we in Newport, Rhode Island, at the Chaplain Command Center of the United States Navy, spent a summer training, doing basic training. We had a Marine gunnery sergeant making us run, do push-ups and sit-ups every morning. I learned all these marching cadences. I can give them to you one day if you want. And we literally rappelled out of a helicopter. I did, and I am afraid of heights. I literally rappelled out of a helicopter. I don't know how I did it. We literally learned how to fight fires. We literally went into fires and did fire training. And they have a ship in a huge indoor pool. They have a mock-up of half of a destroyer, which sinks. It's some automated thing. It sinks, and we literally had to learn how to deal with a sinking ship. And much less like all this swimming stuff, for the Navy, we literally had to pass all these swimming tests and drowning tests and everything. So, yeah, so like everything, there is basic training for certain things. So enough of my little spiel. Let's get into, and we started, so we're going to do a quick brush of the first ones. What are the 48 qualities necessary to become a life dedicated to Torah, or perhaps this is a rabbi? And this is my last sort of opening segment, which is this probably is the basis for Musar, for Jewish spiritual ethics, something that we've studied over and over, because these are qualities that they're looking at, or sort of lifestyles, quality/lifestyle. So I didn't ask. Anyone want to be a reader today? Lynn, until you have to leave at 10:45 to dogs walk or whatever you have to do.
Oh, yeah.
Is that correct?
That's
Okay.
Yeah, not babysitting, dog sitting this time.
Yeah, dog watching. Okay. Okay. So let's just
I can read, Rabbi.
Okay, is that Sherry? I can't see
Yes.
people anymore. Okay,
Yes.
thank you. Let's start, Lynn, and we'll switch to Sherry.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna just, for those who were on last time, we're just gonna sort of do a quick refresher and read through the opening things, and then we're gonna delve deep after we sort of left off. Okay, go ahead. And by the way, if anyone has an issue with some of these, I want to hear if you disagree. Yeah, okay, I'm ready.
Greater is learning Torah than the priesthood and then royalty. For royalty is acquired by 30 stages, and the priesthood by 24, but the Torah by 48 things. By study, attentive listening, proper speech, by an understanding heart, by an intelligent heart, by awe, by fear, by humility, by joy, by attending to the sages, by critical give and take with
Friends. Do you like Friends?
Yeah. By critical give and take with friends, by fine argumentation with disciples, by clear thinking, by study of scripture, by study of Mishnah, by a minimum of sleep, by a minimum of chatter, by a minimum of pleasure, by a minimum of frivolity, by a minimum of preoccupation with worldly matters, by long suffering, by generosity, by faith in the sages, by acceptance of suffering. Learning of Torah is also acquired by one who.
By the way, this is there in most Mishnahs or most Pirkei Avot, there's a break, and this is broken into two separate teachings. This is the break, and you'll notice that there sort of seems to be a sort of change in either the types of qualities or the sort of the way it's presented. Okay.
Learning of Torah is also acquired by one who recognizes his place.
Sorry, it's masculine. That's not my doing.
His or her place. Who rejoices in their portion, who makes offense about their words, who takes no credit for themselves, who is loved, who loves God, who loves their fellow creatures, who loves righteous ways, who loves reproof, who loves uprightness, who keeps themselves far from honors, who does not let their heart become swelled on account of their learning, who does not delight in giving legal decisions, who shares in the bearing of a burden with his colleague, who judges with the scales weighted in his favor, who leads them on to truth, who leads them on to peace, who composes themselves at their study, who asks and answers, who listens to others and themselves, adds to their knowledge, who learns in order to teach, who learns in order to practice, who makes their teacher wiser, who is exact in what they have learned, and who says a thing in the name of.
Oh, sorry. The last one, I cut you off.
Name of him, her who said it. Thus you have learned. Everyone who says a thing in the name of him or her who said it brings deliverance into the world, as it is said. And Esther told the king in Mordecai's name.
Okay. Wow. Okay. That was a big 48. So thank you. Take a breath.
That's the lower 48.
Okay. We sort of did this before. We're going to jump in a second, but any other, when we did this last time, so sorry if it's repetitive. Any initial reactions?
Yes, Rabbi, what comes to mind is there seems to be a very strong emphasis on interpersonal skills, listening to each other, treating others respectfully, etc. You could probably have enough here for several years worth of lectures, taking one of those concepts for each lecture.
Yeah, 100%. Right. And by the way, right, remember, this is what Pirkei Avot, right, our most classic text on Jewish law, because it's part of the Mishnah, right, is teaching about how to acquire Torah, how to become a rabbi, how to have a life dedicated by Torah. And it's, as you said, this is interpersonal ethics.
Rabbi, to differentiate between acquiring Torah, you can know it but how do you bridge the gap between knowing it, spouting it, and applying it, making it happen?
I love, very nice. I really like that. Okay, other sort of opening salvos, opening thoughts before we sort of delve down? I see that quote, I see that text, right? Designed for failure, really hard to live up to this, right? Yeah, this is like, I think I said this last time. The search committees for rabbis or cantors, like, the ultimate, have you ever seen those jokes? Like, a rabbi who has years and years of experience and is so young and vibrant, right? The preschool families, flock to them. They are so young, right? It's like the whole thing, it's both and both, right? Like this is a sort of both and both things. Right? A rabbi that's always there at the hospital bedside and is spending spending days studying Torah, right? Like you can't have one or the other, some sort of in between. Any other sort of opening thoughts, reactions? Okay, I'm going to pull it back up, Lynn. I'm going to call you back. We're going to just look at a few at a time. So last time, right? Number one, we didn't really address number one, but by study, obviously that's the first thing. So as Elliot said, right, it's about knowing Torah is really important here. So I want to acknowledge that. Also, a life dedicated to study is the first thing. So it's not just how you live your life, right? But it's being a lifelong learner. Did someone want to say something?
Yes, I wanted to say something.
Yes, Jackie.
This is antithetical to the kind of other directedness that represents true learning. When Solomon was asked what he wanted, he didn't want just wisdom. He wanted an understanding heart. And that's different. One can know something in an intellectual way, but you have to take it into yourself and make it how you live your life. Mm-hmm. And that is much more important than just, there are a lot of people who can read something and recite it perfectly verbatim. But if you ask them, what was that really about? They can't tell you.
Really nice. And it's synthesizing and integrating it into who you are.
Exactly.
Really nice. Thank you. Thank you. So again, last time we talked about attentive listening, right? And what that is, like a loaded phrase, proper speech. We talked about that. Understanding heart, intelligent heart. And we talked about awe and fear. And that's I think those were ones that we focused on. So I want to sort of move forward from that. Humility, I think, is pretty self-explanatory, correct? Who's the model of humility?
Well, Esther was.
Tradition? Esther, okay. Yeah. Okay, good. Right. Traditionally, who do we understand as our model? Moses. Right. Moses is God. And of course, Moses sort of wrote the Torah, depending on how you understand it, right? And somehow the Torah says Moses was the most humble man ever to live in the world. So you can take it at face value. But humility, living with humility is a really important quality throughout Torah. And Moses, remember, what do we call Moses? What's his sort of title?
The servant of God.
Okay. That's right. That's what the Torah calls Moses. What's the sort of like rabbinic appellation?
Moshe Rabbeinu.
Moshe Rabbeinu, right? Moses, our rabbi and our right. Moses, our rabbi and our teacher. So again, right? If we understand Moses as the first rabbi, right? And if these are perhaps some of these are qualities of Moses that we're trying to sort of pattern ourselves after, right? So some of these speak to Moses, right? Okay. Besimcha, with joy. Where are you? Did you think joy was going to be on the list of the 48? If I was just going to ask you, take a step back, what are the 48 qualities that are necessary to be a rabbi or to attain a life of Torah? Where did you think joy was going to be in it? Did you think joy was going to be this high? Again, I don't know if they're ranked by numbers, but I'll sort of rank it here.
What about Ivdu es Hashem v'simcha?
Yeah, I'm not disagreeing. Yeah, by the way, this is number 8. Yeah, right. So what Elliot is saying is this quote. Yeah,
according to the Hasidic tradition, joy is right up there with study and knowledge.
100%, and that's what Elliot quoted. There's a very famous verse, 100%, right? So this for Hasidim, right, and the Hasidic revival and the Hasidic movement in the last 300 years, right? Joy is essential. Now, when you think about Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Tarfon and Rabbi Yoshua and Rabbi Yossi, right, and all these like Mishnah rabbis, do you think about, does joy sort of come out? Is there like a prevailing quality that made them who they were?
We'd have to ask their wives.
Or their families, right? So it's interesting, like the Talmud doesn't really, well, I shouldn't say that. Where does the Talmud focus on joy?
At weddings.
The weddings? Okay, good. Where else?
Holidays,
yeah. So there definitely is an Oneg Shabbat, right? Oneg means delight or joy. So there definitely is. So my question to them is, if I'm going to question this mission, then is that Ron? My question is, yeah, go ahead, Ron.
I was going to say this by joy here. Isn't it contradicted later on by saying a minimum of pleasure and a minimum of frivolity?
Yes. So I want to boil that down, right? So the question is, what here it's joy is open, So like, what joy is it? The same sort of joy that we think about, and that was really nice. So can I read a commentary here?
Yep.
Okay. So here's a few commentaries on the joy here. Joy which broadens the mind, sharpens the intellect, unlocks the memory, right? Moreover, one who does not enjoy their studies, finds the Torah burdensome, will cease from learning. So is that the type of joy you were thinking about? I don't know. Let me give you another one. When a person studies Torah, they must do so with joy and not consider it a burden or laborious task. They must be happy, eliminating any concerns and worries from their mind. When a person is burdened with concerns and worries, they are unable to grasp what they are learning. Is that what you thought about when you heard this first?
Absolutely not. Think of the days of Hebrew school and trying to learn Torah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Kids are very recalcitrant.
Oh, yeah. Any other thoughts on Simcha?
You have to think what it is that brings the joy.
Yeah.
Yeah. To me, Simcha is the joy of the holidays, the joy of Shabbos, the joy of family together.
Yeah, amen.
Well, we have to differentiate between joy and fun. Fun would be frivolous.
Yes, 100%. Yes, Ruth.
The word Simcha is connected to Hasameach Bechelko. You have to be happy with your lot.
Very nice. Yes, referring back to one of the first Mishnayot. Yeah, good. Okay, I want to sort of move us on, but thank you. Yeah, I mean, again, as Elliot said, like we could literally spend half an hour on each of these one words or these phrases, right? Boil down what is meant by Simcha. What do they mean here? How do we live with Simcha? What's the right way to live with Simcha? Right? How to live with joy, but not frivolity. And we'll talk about that later when we get to it. Perfect. Okay. Interestingly, the next one is betahara. Right? Which is?
Purity.
With purity. Yeah. Where's the translation here? Interestingly, it's not that is an untranslated thing here. Take a look. It doesn't exist. They go straight from joy to attending to the sages. I don't know why English could not bring themselves to write that.
Is tahara a process of becoming more pure, going through different stages?
Could be. What do you think it means here that to acquire Torah, to become either a rabbi or someone whose life is dedicated to Torah, that tahara is important? What do you think that means?
Living a good, clean life.
Progression. Can you become pure and more pure? A gradual cleansing over time.
It could be. Yeah. So I will say, now I'm looking, I don't know if we said this before, there are different versions. So I do have in one of my books here that it is not in the Hebrew version. They must add a 48 somewhere else. I got to now compare it. So that's why the English is probably from a different version as opposed to the Hebrew version. So in this version that I'm looking at from my good friend, the Israeli mailman Kahati, his Hebrew does not have tahara in here. But let me read to you.
If you click on that word batahara in your Safaria, one of the things it says is, he who sees the sky in restored brightness.
Oh, yeah?
Yep.
Wait, so read it again.
He who sees the sky in its restored brightness.
Interesting. Okay, here, I'll give you two other commentaries. When a person studies Torah, they must totally eliminate all evil thoughts from their mind, for the Torah is pure and holy, and will not endure in a mind fouled by unclean thoughts. The Talmud says that a person can study Torah in true purity only after they are married, since their mind then is free of evil thoughts. So single people cannot acquire Torah, according to this. Let me give you a second commentary. Purity in this Mishnah does not refer to being free of ritual contamination, the traditional, priestly understanding or the Torah's understanding of tahara, but rather purity of motivation and purity of purpose. What do you think about that? Agree? Disagree? You like it?
That makes the assumption that if one is married, that they would not be capable of impure thoughts. The divorce courts give the light. So I want to pull the marriage thing aside, but what do you think about that idea about being pure of purpose and motivation? I like it. I don't know. What do you guys think?
Hidden agendas. No hidden agendas?
Yeah, no hidden agendas. Exactly.
How do you measure purity?
How do you measure a lot of these things? Yeah.
Right.
And who's doing the measuring?
Yeah.
That's another good question. Yeah. In Musar, they had, in traditional Musar in the 1800s, they had Musar circles, which were basically like support groups where you had accountability. And every week you actually brought in like your little checklist and you went over like when I did good on purity and when I did bad. And you sort of like have a check-it, sort of like an AA meeting or something. Yeah. Go ahead, Lynn.
Oh, I was going to say, did you see the message in the chat?
Oh, not the most recent one. Hold on. Thank you. Is this joy in worldly things? Later we're warned not to enjoy. Yeah, so exactly. This is specifically the opposite, Bill. Sorry, I missed that a while ago. Right. This is that, as we say, pulling away. This isn't fun. Right? This is, and it's not really pleasure, right? This is sort of the joy that comes from living a good life. Or maybe, as Ruth said, the joy that comes from enjoying what we have already. Yeah, exactly. Okay, we're going to keep rolling on unless anybody has another comment. As I said, we can literally spend years looking at this one Mishnah. Remember, I said I think we studied for 3 hours in my first day of rabbinical school. Okay, Beshimush Chachamim, by attending to the sages. What do you think that means? Why is that important?
If you spend time with knowledgeable people, you'll learn from them. And presumably they're worthwhile, that you will imbibe some of that.
Yeah. Everyone agree? We're all in agreement? This is sort of like a mentorship. I think this is mentorship, right? Is that what we call that nowadays?
Yep.
We used to call it apprenticeship, but this is like making sure that you have a rabbinic mentor or a Torah mentor, right? Okay, good. We're all good with that. Okay, the next one is, right? Bediduk chaverim. By fine argumentations with disciples. Actually, that's critical give and take with friends. What do you think that means? Critical give and take with friends.
That's how a lot of very good learning takes place, where thoughts are challenged. It forces you to think.
This is the basis for chavruta.
Yep, you got it. Right, and the word chaver there is also, right, by that's partner learning, right, that we learn off of each other and sort of try to boil down points. Go ahead.
And of course, it's got to be for the sake of heaven. Otherwise, it's no good.
Well, and that's what we're going to learn about in this week's parsha with Korach, right? So here, there are actually two versions of this Mishnah, by the way, in case you don't know. One is B'dibuk Chaverim, and one is B'diduk Chaverim. Ruth, what's the difference? B'dibuk versus B'diduk.
The book is like pasting together or
gluing.
Gluing, yes.
Gluing together.
Gluing together. And what's the other one?
So basically closeness, right? Having a closeness with a colleague versus dikduk.
A dikduk is what I do to you when you speak Hebrew.
I know, correcting or correcting for a good reason. Yeah. So careful, inspection, right? So this is what the commentary says. This is my Rabbi Twersky. They are interdependent, right? It's precisely because Torah study requires a close relationship that one must carefully choose one's colleagues. Scholars who study together cannot but influence one another. Studying with someone who does not have the proper attitude toward Torah, whose logic is distorted, can impair our learning, right? Right, blah, blah, blah. So that's the idea, right? So we should always study with someone who that's going to bring us closer with that person, and we should be able to sort of challenge, correct, and help influence each other. Yes, that's what we're doing right now.
In making the choice, the person deciding who to go to for learning, there would be judgments made on the interpersonal relationship, warmth as opposed to lack of warmth, and assumptions or judgments regarding that person's knowledge.
Could be. Yeah. All right, Peelpool. Do you know that word, Peelpool? Have you heard that before? Yes, Peelpool Tamidim. Anyone know what Peelpool is? Besides Ruth?
No.
Ruth, what's Peelpool?
It sounds familiar, but I can't remember.
I don't know if it's the same root as Pilpel, which is pepper.
Well, maybe it is. Maybe it is.
I'll have to check it.
Peelpool is really fine point argumentation. This was the traditional distinction between the Misnagdim and the Hasidim in the 17th centuries, like the Litvaks versus the Hasidim, right? The Peelpool, right? Like they would boil down to the finest argument in the Talmud, like the smallest little argument in the Talmud, right? They'd study in the yeshiva for days and days and days without rest, trying to boil down to everything. Yeah, Ruth.
The dictionary calls Peelpool dispute, debate, argumentation, hair splitting.
Yes, that's what I meant by the hair splitting.
Yeah.
So, by the way, it says a good person, right, who acquires Torah does hair splitting. right? Like studies to this amount, right? Let me look at some commentary here. Trying to find a good comment on this. By the argumentation of disciples whose queries and responses sharpens a person's mind and clarify the subject under study, right? Like in order to gain Torah, we should have people like fact checking and digging deep into what we believe in and what we work, right? We shouldn't feel like we have a final answer and not be open to critique. What do you think?
People should welcome constructive criticism.
Yeah, that's what this is about. Exactly. Exactly. Okay. We ready to move forward? Where were we? Beyishuv. This they translated here as by clear thinking. Anyone know how a better translation of yishuv? What did you know the Hebrew root of it?
Lashevet.
Lashevet, to sit. Right? To be settled. To be settled, right? The yishuv, right? You may have heard that word before, right? Is a settlement, right? So this is really about being calm. Excuse me 1 second. Sorry about that. Okay. Have you all been calm and settled? Right. When a person is asked a question, they should answer calmly. What do you think? Is that someone who is sort of devoted to Torah? Right? Cultivating a tranquil disposition. Right? It refers to a calm, unhurried train of thoughts. What do you think? Is that a good quality for someone who is dedicated to a life of Torah?
That's an ideal, I think. But I think probably it's hard to come by in real life on two legs.
Right. By the way, remember what this preceded, or what was preceded by it, I should say. Right. Preceded by it was that like careful hair splitting, right? Yeah. Critique. So it's interesting, right? One should be able to take careful hair splitting critique. And then the next thing they say is, right, you should be calm, especially in responding to things.
I like the further on where it says be long suffering.
Yeah, we'll get there in a second, right? So now they're going to give just a little bit of the basis. So, right, you should study Mikra, which is the Bible. You should study Mishnah, which is obviously the Mishnah. That's a time period here, right? Obviously, we would expand out because this is from the time of the Mishnah. So everything else. Okay, now we get these sort of minimal things. B'mi'ut schora. I think we talked a little bit about this last time, right? One should have a minimum of sleep.
Not a good idea.
Not a good idea. Well, do you remember what we talked about last time, why the rabbis put this in, probably?
No, we deem it admirable on Pesach.
Well, that too, but what's the reason why? What's meritorious about minimum of sleep?
Because they wanted you to be able to study fully and not be totally asleep when you're studying, but not waste time.
Right, it's the second half of what you said. Wasting time. Wasting time. Yes, that's the problem. Oh, I'm going to mute you, Bill. Sorry. Okay. Okay, we're back. Wasting time. Right, Bottelsman, if you've heard that phrase before, maybe. I know it's not. I didn't say it the Hebrew way. I said it the Yiddish way. Sorry, Ruth. Right. Right. Wasting time. The rabbis say like, oh, you just spent 3 hours binging a Netflix show and you watched 3 episodes, right? Like you could have done better, right? That could have been a better use of your time, right? Like in our world today, you surf the internet for an hour looking for, whatever.
Unless you were watching Shitzel or something.
Yeah, of course. Unless you were watching, JBS, the Jewish channel, right, or whatever else. Yeah, listening to a Torah podcast or something. Yeah, right. The rabbis say, right, like yes, you can work, you can have relationships, you can meet with friends, right? Those things are all important, but like wasting time, no. You should, if you have any free time, you should be dedicating it to Torah. I remember all these rabbis had side jobs. They actually had jobs, most of them. They weren't rabbis full time. They were blacksmiths and farmers and, tanners, and go down the list. So they did not have a lot of spare time. Right? So this is about not wasting time. This is about making the most of your time and dedicating your time to a higher purpose. Right.
Where did this translation come from? Because between Mishnah and Biyumutz Derech Eretz, there's a grand total of 2 words, and in English it says by minimum of sleep, by minimum of chatter, by minimum of pleasure, by minimum virality. Where is all that coming from 2 words?
Right. So as I say, there's multiple versions. Actually, yeah, that's this stuff. Yeah. So there are all these bimiyuts. Yeah, they're like out of order. This is not the same order here. But if you can see, it says Dr. Joshua Kolp, who I happen to know. He's a conservative rabbi. He was at the conservative yeshiva. I'm not sure if he still is. So I guess it's his translation. Sefaria is sort of like a free open source thing. Like anybody can put a text in. I don't like how they verify it, but if I wrote a translation, if I went on and there was some text that I like that it doesn't have a translation, it's just Hebrew or Yiddish, I can actually submit mine to be added to it. So that's what I'm assuming he did. I will say Dr. Joshua Kolp is more learned than me, so I cannot say which, he may have been using the text of the Mishnah that he considers as the more accepted, or the original text. Okay, but there are all these mutes. It's interesting, like there's a list of, let's just look in the Hebrew, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 of these minimums, right? What are a Torah life is supposed to be a life of, not diminishment, but like, what are we supposed to be sort of playing down in life? Pleasure, frivolity, preoccupation with everything going on in the larger world, right? Chatter, which means sort of like side talk, just schmoozing. Sleep.
I have a comment about preoccupation with what's going on in the larger world. There's so many things going on today that one might look at in terms of Torah perspective. For example, this recent Roe versus Wade being overturned. If we are to be exemplary people and or lagoyim, how can we have a minimum of occupation with what's going on around us? Should we live in a vacuum?
100. Great. All right. I have a response, but let's open it up to the group. Response.
Well, we're also elsewhere told that the welfare of the state is important.
Yes. Other thoughts? So I think, I'm going to stop share just for a second so we can look at each other. I think that we are living in a different, just general worldview of Jews, number one, right? In the time of the Mishnah, when this was composed, where was the significant majority of the Jewish community living?
Was it in Spain or?
No, the Mishnah.
Babylon.
Yeah, well, they were either in one or two, either Babylonia or in Israel. So this was and it was a pretty insular community, right? And Jews that got involved with the Romans, let's say, right? Because this is written unclear. Again, it's unclear the timing of this, probably after the destruction, but unclear, right? Jews that got involved with Rome, was it so positive other than Yochanan ben Zakkai's, agreement that he made?
Anytime
right? It was problematic, right?
Yep.
Right. So number one, just looking at the reality of the rabbis 2,000 years ago, right? It wasn't getting involved in worldly stuff wasn't so helpful, right? It was problematic and it perhaps led to significant loss, right? And the outside world didn't, Jews living in Babylonia had it a lot better. They were more accepted, could sort of have their own communities, but again, they were pretty insular. So, right, our reality, number one, is very different, just our living situation, right? We are a minority living in a majority, world that is not Jewish. And there are different levels of acceptance and
hostility.
And hostility, exactly, right? So, but our lives, at least the lives that we live as Jews, right, require us daily not only to be in relationship, but to be everything with with the larger non-Jewish world, right? So, so I think, right, the reality of what the Mishnah was back then is very different. And of course, we're required to be involved in worldly affairs, right? So again, like the commentary here is, right, moderation of worldly affairs means limiting one's business dealings and social intercourse with non-Jews, right? Obviously, that's not who we are. That's not who we should be right now. Right? And as Elliot said, we're Americans and we vote, right? Thank God we have religious freedom, right? And we should be able to speak our minds on that, right? And not fear reprisal. Trying to see if there's any other good comment. I want to give you the classic commentary first, right? Again, I think I said this last time, right? One of these here is that they understand the sort of the worldliness in a very different way. They spin it. And so here they're saying worldliness refers to illicit sexual activity. Right? Being involved in the world means that you're like going out in the world looking for, some sexual misconduct or something. So again, I don't want to focus on that, but I agree with Elliot. Different reality. We must be involved in the larger community, right? We actually have something to say, right? We come from a long-standing tradition, and it's important to be. In fact, to be a Jew today means to be actively and civically engaged and building relationships and partnerships with our non-Jewish neighbors and leaders. 100%. Okay, we got like 4 minutes left. Let's do one more. Oh, we're not even like halfway through. What happened here? Gavalt. Maybe it is going to take a year to get through this one. Okay. All right, again, this is out of order. I guess let's do the English order. The Hebrew is Kabbalat HaYisorim, by being long suffering, right? Acquiring Torah, right? Living a life dedicated to Torah, becoming a rabbi, is that the person has to be long suffering, an acceptance of suffering. What does that mean?
Well, the main goal is not your particular comfort, but to comfort others.
Okay.
You should have Rahmanas on people.
Okay, good. I'm going to stop the share just because I think this is the last one. Other thoughts? Any other thoughts? Do you think this should be on the list? that a person acquires Torah, is like dedicated to a life of Torah, or is a rabbi that has to be long suffering and accept their suffering? It's problematic.
When this was written, probably.
All right, should I give you some of the traditional commentaries on it?
Sure.
Okay. Accepting misfortune with love, without questioning the ways of God. That's comment number one. Comment number two. Submission to sorrow signifies that even when overcome with grief, a person should not be deterred from studying Torah or their overriding attachment to Jewish tradition. Okay, comment number whatever. Okay, here's the next one.
What about beyond studying Torah, having an unshakable belief that despite one's circumstances, God is somehow with us?
That's exact. So yes, that's the next one, right? Even if a person has many troubles, right, it should not let them abandon Torah, accept the troubles with joy, realize that the reward will be in the world to come. Here's Rabbi Twersky. This is undoubtedly one of the most difficult challenges a person faces. Avoidance of pain is instinctive and is present in all forms of life that have a sensory system. The Torah does not demand of us anything which is beyond our capacity. It is only natural for a person to avoid pain. Yet the instinctive reaction of avoiding pain and the acceptance of suffering are not contradictory. Pain and suffering are generally thought to be synonymous. If someone says, "I'm in pain," you know they are suffering. Technically, however, there is a difference between the two. If a person in severe pain is given morphine, they may say that the pain is gone. If they're questioned carefully and told to focus on the sensation, they may report that the pain is still there, but it doesn't bother them as much. This is also true of the anesthetic effect that can be induced under hypnosis. The person may say that they're very comfortable, but again, if they draw attention to the sensation caused, that the discomfort is still there. Although it is somewhat difficult to grasp, the fact is that suffering occurs when the brain interprets the pain sensation as discomfort. Just as morphine or hypnosis can prevent the brain's interpretation of pain, so can a person's attitude or state of mind. A person with a profound love of God and emunah, belief, that God will never allow any real harm to befall us, may be able to feel the pain sensation, yet not be suffering. However, very few people are able to accomplish this. For most of us, pain and suffering are inseparable. Neither physical nor emotional pain can always be safely relieved by medication. There are times when we have no other choice but to adjust to a life filled with suffering. What do you think?
Amen.
It's part of human condition.
Yeah. Judy, did you want to say something? No, I saw you unmuted, Judy. Yeah, it's a little bit of recognition of the human condition. I don't have any great answers, but I thought those sort of spoke a little bit to it. So
I have an answer.
Yeah.
There was a famous rabbi, his name was Rabbi Hal, who once told me when I asked him why me, his answer was, God tested Abraham 23 times, and Abraham withstood all the tests. My name happens to be Avraham Ruvain, and it was appropriate that was the answer you gave me.
Amen. Thanks, Bob. Thanks, Bob. So number one, I want to thank you for learning with me. Next week is July 4th. We're not going to have class then. I promise you we're going to find a few class times that are going to be different than Mondays. I've been negligent on that. I will email this group and the next day or two, or maybe Diane, my assistant, will, and we'll find a few days in July that are not Mondays. I actually only have one Monday I'm available to teach in July, so I want to try to find another alternative day. So stay tuned. We will have class. I guess we haven't finished this, but I'm not going to do a big, we are going to finish this. I'm not going to do a big intro the next time. We're just going to jump into it to finish it the next time. So thank you for learning with me. Again, it's not going to be Mondays. We'll get you the info so that everyone has more than a week to put it on their calendar. Hope you're all well. Enjoy the warm weather. Stay safe, and thanks for learning with me. Have a good day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you, Yashar Koach.
Bye, everybody.
Another great class.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.